Nashville Predators take on the Anaheim Ducks tonight at Bridgestone Arena. A key lesson from the last time these two teams played may help determine who wins tonight. Plus, Cody Glass back in the lineup. Should Preds fans change their expectations of him based on what we've seen from him this season? Plus, we'll break down the messy Cutter Gauthier situation and the implications this could have on the NHL moving forward on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to give a special shout out to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys and we appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio. My normal partner in crime, Ann Kimmel, is off today, so we're riding solo today. Do want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. A loaded show today. The Predators are going to take on the Anaheim Ducks, and Cody Glass is expected to be in the lineup for the first time since the end of December. It's been a rough season for Cody Glass. We'll hear from him about what's been going on this year and whether the Predators fans should change their expectations of what Glass can be for the team moving forward. Plus, it's the talk of the NHL over the past 24 hours or so. Cutter Gauthier, the 5th overall pick from the 2022 NHL draft, is traded to the Anaheim Ducks, who the Preds will see tonight, based on him just not wanting to play for the Philadelphia Flyers. An interesting situation, could have some long-term implications for the NHL as a whole. We'll dive into that situation coming up in a little bit, but first we'll talk about tonight's game at Bridgestone Arena. Nashville Predators taking on the Anaheim Ducks, 7 o'clock Central puck drop. This is going to be an interesting game for the Nashville Predators. On paper, it should be another one of those games like we saw, against Chicago last week, where all the momentum is going to favor the Nashville Predators. But again, this is the Nashville Predators team that's kind of like the Forrest Gump box of chocolates, where you're never quite sure which version of the Predators are you going to get. Are you going to get their team that's on their A game, that battles for 60 minutes, that it goes toe-to-toe with some of the NHL's best all-around teams and pulls out a win? Or are you going to get the team that turns the puck over 15 times a game? Are you going to get the team that just can't get out of their own way, takes dumb penalties, turns the puck over in front of their own net? A good example of this was the first time that the Preds and Ducks played this season. Remember, they played on November 15th. Back at Bridgestone Arena. If you don't remember that game, the Preds had a 2-0 lead. Seems pretty par from the course over the past little bit. And then they kind of shot themselves in the foot. They had the 2-0 lead. Ducks came back and won 3-2. They had a couple of bad defensive giveaways late, the last two of which led to the tying and winning goals, respectively. You also had the Predators have 16 giveaways in that game. They were not careful with the puck, despite outshotting the Ducks 30-20 in that game. The Predators let a pretty good overall game slip away due to too many key mistakes at key times. And that is going to be the key for the Predators tonight, is not making those same mistakes. If you get a lead, we've talked about this on the podcast previously, where it seems like the Predators get the 2-0 lead or have a lead late, and for some reason just can't find that extra gear to lock it down. And in fact, they're kind of going the other way. Their play gets worse in those situations. You talked about it before. We mentioned this on yesterday's show. a lot of people, when their team gets the lead late, the conversation is always just don't change anything. Don't do, don't try to do too much. Don't try to park the bus. Just keep playing your game and you'll be fine. And I think we've learned over the past couple of years that that's not necessarily the case either. You're going to have to do what you do, but you're going to need to step it up a little bit in situations like that when you have a 2-goal lead, because the other team is going to go all out. The other team is going to start throwing everything they can at net. And the Nashville Predators, for whatever reason, they're not parking the bus or anything, but they're not finding that extra gear to match the other team's extra gear. That's why when, you think back to the Dallas game right before Christmas, when the Predators had the 2-0 lead and blew it in the last 13 seconds of the game or whatever it wound up being, Dallas was absolutely owning possession the entire, third period. And Nashville couldn't step up. Nashville couldn't have the same players who had helped them for the first 2 periods step up and kind of, do what they did times 10. That's clutch time. You need your key guys to step up in those situations. And the Predators have had trouble doing that late in games. So for me, if I'm the Nashville Predators, I want to see that lead held from start to finish. If the Predators get a 2-0 lead, I want to see them be even better in the second period. I want to see them handle Anaheim's counterpunch and be able to throw some punches back the other way themselves. This is an Anaheim Ducks team that is struggling right now. 5 straight losses for the Anaheim Ducks. John Gibson, who has had a very solid season after a handful of not so great seasons. He's out right now. He's missed time with an illness, questionable for tonight. You do have Frank Vetrano, who is an NHL All-Star, who's kind of their top scorer. They have a lot of good young players. But this is a team that's really kind of struggling to match other teams' firepower this late in the season. And that's why a big thing tonight is for the Preds' big guns to step up and be those big guns. You talk about Philip Forsberg. We've mentioned him 100 times. He's on a career high pace. He's on pace to top the season he had a couple of years ago in 2022. Ryan O'Reilly, 6 points in his last 4 games. This is on pace to be his best scoring season since 2019. Gustav Nyquist, 8-game point streak entering tonight, 12 points in those 8 games. Those are the guys that you're going to look to tonight to win their battles. Look, Anaheim, they have some good pieces. They have some young talent on their team. They are going to maybe be a good team in a couple of years, but right now the top end talent for the Anaheim Ducks is just nowhere near anybody else's in the NHL right now. Except maybe the San Jose Sharks, but that's a different story. And so if you're the Nashville Predators, if you're that Forsberg, O'Reilly, Nyquist line, you're licking your lips at this matchup, because you should, on paper, absolutely outmatch whoever is on the ice for Anaheim in this situation. And that's going to be another key for tonight, is those big guns have to be big guns. Forsberg, O'Reilly, Nyquist, you want to see them get on the board early, get on the board often. And if they do that, there's not a lot of depth up and down that Anaheim lineup that can come back and match up. So the top end talent for the Predators, that big advantage they have, is going to play huge dividends in the game tonight. And the other aspect of it is Roman Josi. This is a game in which you would like to see a little bit more for Roman Josi. A little bit quiet this season from the Predators captain. 31 points in 40 games this season, which isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, especially for a defenseman. That's pretty good for a defenseman. Although Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar might have something to say about that. But, it's not quite the 96-point Roman Josi we saw a few years ago. And yeah, I know things are different. The offense doesn't exactly run through him anymore. Andrew Burnett's kind of changed that up. It's that top line that's kind of creating a lot of the carrying a lot of the offensive burden themselves. But it still feels like there's an extra gear left for Roman Josi, especially on offense. And maybe that's something that comes out in this next little stretch of games for the Nashville Predators. It just feels like there's one more gear for Roman Josi to try to get his offensive game going. Will it happen tonight against the Anaheim Ducks? That's a question we'll have to wait and see. That is a 7 o'clock Central puck drop. Ann and I, assuming Ann is feeling slightly better tomorrow, we'll have a full recap of that game coming up for you tomorrow. Tonight, another big storyline to watch is Cody Glass. He is going to be back in the lineup, according to both him and Andrew Rennett, barring any sort of weird injury situation. What's been the deal with Cody Glass this season? Not the season a lot of Preds fans had in mind for him. He talks about what's been going on for him, why he struggled, and whether Preds fans' expectations of what number 8 can become should change based on this rough start to the season. These are topics we'll tackle in just 1 second, but first, want to mention today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, the NFL season is finally in the books, folks. We have playoffs to look forward to this week. Well, assuming you're not a Tennessee Titans fan, but even if you are, you can still get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And that's because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Again, all you have to do is put $5 down and you get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find specific bets in the new Explore tab. You can also make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays. And of course, a lot of the traditional bets. You can do the money line, over, under, and player props, like how many passing yards will Patrick Mahomes have this weekend? How many rushing yards will Jahmyr Gibbs have for the Detroit Lions? All kinds of different player props, and of course, spreads, money lines, that kind of thing. So be sure you check out FanDuel to check out all the action. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet a kick right through the uprights. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right. Nashville Predators take on the Anaheim Ducks tonight at Bridgestone Arena, and a big storyline for the Predators is going to be the return of Cody Glass. Cody Glass hasn't played since December 29th. He's been a healthy scratch for the Predators' last handful of games. This is not the season that Cody Glass, I think, envisioned, and not this season that a lot of Preds fans envisioned. Remember, this was a guy who by the end of the year last year was one of the Nashville Predators' best players. He kind of went from that fringe guy that rotates in and out of the lineup, earned himself a permanent middle six role in the lineup last year, and became a really solid two-way player for the Nashville Predators. 35 points last season, 14 goals and 21 assists, both 100% career highs. It was also the first time he's played, pretty much an entire season. So there's that. The other thing about last year was that his defense was incredible. Like, this was one of the Predators' best defensive forwards. Not just that, but was in probably the top 10% in terms of defense for forwards in the entire NHL. And this was a guy that was doing it as a 22-year-old. So I think a lot of people entered this season thinking Cody Glass was not only going to kind of expand on that performance, but maybe, sort of lock himself as to being a really solid two-way player in the NHL, sort of earn a permanent role in the, if this not the second line, maybe even the first. There's a lot of people, including me, that thought, hey, maybe Ryan O'Reilly's your number 2 center, and Cody Glass is kind of the guy that leads Philip Forsberg, into a good season. And it just hasn't happened this year. Of course, the injury concerns have not helped Cody Glass. He's now had 2 major injuries this season. That cost him a lot of time. But even when he's been in the lineup, that impact just hasn't been there. In 16 games this year, 1 goal and 1 assist. A lot of people have mentioned, hey, is he still hurt? Is he not 100%? But it's been a while since he's been healthy, and he just hasn't been able to kind of get back into gear yet. And I think a lot of Preds fans are starting to be concerned about Cody Glass, because this was a guy that the Predators kind of had circled on their roster in terms of somebody they can invest in terms of somebody they can build upon. And it just hasn't happened this year. So from the coach's perspective, there's still a lot of belief there. The Predators believe in Cody Glass. And he mentioned that when we spoke with him yesterday, during Preds practice. He mentioned that he had confidence because the coaching staff had confidence in him.
That'll be good. I've had a lot of conversations with Bruno, coaches and stuff like that. So they've been nothing but positive. They want to see me succeed, and that's something great that I love hearing, obviously. But I think just the mental side of it is where it was affecting me a lot. Had nothing to do with my body or whatever it was. It was just all in my head. So it's nice to kind of get out of my own head. And like I said, just find that joy in playing hockey again.
And that's tough for a situation for a young guy like Cody Glass to be in, is just that mental side. We've had this conversation with a couple of Predators players in the past, including some of the guys this year. Look, when things aren't going well, you're starting to force it a little bit. You're starting to overthink. We saw it with Yakov Trenin at the start of the season, where he had no points through the entire first month of the season, sat out for a game, came back in and did gangbusters. We saw it with Luke Evangelista recently. We saw it with Phil Tomasino on a couple of different occasions, where sometimes these healthy scratches, Andrew Brunette are treating him as just an excuse to sort of reset for these young players. And I hope that's what's happening with Cody Glass, where it's a situation where he doesn't have to face game action, where he can go in and sort of recenter himself, sort of, get his mind right on track and not overthink the small things during the game. We saw him last year sort of make basic hockey plays that wound up being really good. And I think that's what was the most impressive thing about Glass's game last year, was he did the simple things so well. He won a lot of puck battles below the net, especially in the offensive zone. He kind of had that little power forward Ryan Johansson look about him, where he was able to kind of fight off defenders and create space. We saw him with good puck instincts, just go to the net, even with or without the puck, and sort of force the other team to react to you, sort of force a situation where, a defender might have to keep his eye on you and not the puck carrier. These are all things that worked in Cody Glass's favor last year. And I think it is a good reminder for him to get back to the simple things. And I think if he does that, if he starts making just good basic hockey one-on-one plays, not worry about doing anything too fancy, not worrying about making, the extra pass, but just go back to his instincts, I think you're going to see Cody Glass sort of get back to where he was last season. Maybe the points won't match where they were last season, but in terms of level of play, I think if he goes back to basics, we'll see him at the level of that. Does this season change anything about Glass's perspective? It's too early to say. You want to see him, kind of go out the rest of the year. Look, Andrew Brunette has a different way of playing than John Hines does. John Hines was a lot more meat and potatoes kind of hockey, where Andrew Brunette is more, Red Bull vodka and Totino's pizza rolls. I didn't have a good comparison for that, but that is what you want to see Cody Glass do, is, sort of mesh with that team. And it's too early to tell if that is going to be, a topic of conversation for them this year. So we'll have to see. And we'll have to see if Cody Glass can kind of step up and meet the expectations for Andrew Brunette's style of play. I still think he has a chance. I just think we're going to have to see him step up and play his best hockey of the season over these next couple of months to really get a full sort of grasp on what Cody Glass can become. Speaking of prospects, the Philadelphia Flyers certainly had some interesting news regarding their prospects. Cutter Gauthier, you guys have probably seen this situation. What should we make of it? We'll talk about that coming up. First, though, I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. If you've ever bought tickets to a sporting event, a concert, a comedy show, even like theater, you've probably had a frustrating experience with buying tickets. First off, you're not really sure where your seats are. Is there weird sight lines? Are you stuck behind some obstructed view? Plus, when you go get ready to pay, there's all these hidden fees, and all of a sudden, these $20 tickets you're trying to buy can turn into a $100 process. Don't let that happen to you. Get the Gametime app and take the stress out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive, and your all-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. And you can buy your tickets in seconds with just 2 taps on your phone. And the best thing about Gametime is there are always great deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, sometimes even an hour after it starts. So it's the place to find last minute seats on everything from concerts to comedy shows to football games, hockey games, theater, whatever you think. Gametime's got great deals for you. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so let's dive into the big news around the NHL. Well, this was juicy, wasn't it? I think a lot of people outside of the Flyers front office maybe were a little shocked to see what came down the pipe last night. Cutter Gauthier, very, very good prospect. A lot of people think he's going to be an elite goal scorer in the NHL. 5th overall pick from the Philadelphia Flyers in the 2022 NHL draft. Traded to the Anaheim Ducks. His rights traded to Anaheim anyway. In exchange for Jamie Drysdale, who is a very big part of the Ducks' future, and a 2nd-round pick. Interesting week for the Anaheim Ducks, to say the least. It came out that, according to sources, that Cutter Gauthier just didn't want to play for the Philadelphia Flyers and started kind of no-showing stuff, kind of started ghosting the Flyers. According to Danny Briere, he was happy about being drafted. He went to their development camp the year he was drafted. And then somewhere along the line, something changed. Gauthier did not go to this year's development camp. Apparently, in private, Gauthier told the Flyers that he didn't want to play in Philadelphia, and that for whatever reason, he just sort of stopped responding. Keith Jones said they tried to kind of talk him out of it. We're told Gauthier's decision was final, didn't want to come to Philadelphia. The Flyers said they attempted to kind of smooth things over as the year went on, but it became harder and harder to even get a hold of Gauthier. And what we had was basically a mess. Here's the situation. It did not go well on Twitter afterwards. The reaction from Flyers fans was exactly what you expected it to be. This guy is getting doxxed by some guy in a Westchester basement somewhere sometime soon. He has become public enemy number 1 in Philadelphia, despite, I think, a lot of casual sports fans maybe not ever hearing the name before now. You saw the Philadelphia Flyers owner come out with a scathing interview, basically just saying, I don't feel bad for him when he comes to Philadelphia. It's going to be a rough ride here, and he earned it because we're Philadelphians and we want people to be here with us. That was from Dan Hilferty, the Flyers owner, basically throwing a 19-year-old kid under the bus. Here's the deal. I think this situation is kind of the perfect intersect between old school sports and new school sports. We've seen a lot of, older NHL players basically be like, the prospects are soft nowadays. If you get drafted, that's a big honor and you should be proud to represent that team. But we also see around sports this kind of new school way of thinking where, hey, if you don't want to be there, it's your life, it's your career. Do something else, like in the NBA. with stars like Kevin Durant, who's been traded 50 times, or James Harden, who's been traded 50 times, where it's just like, hey, if they want out, they want out. And, we see a lot of people applaud them. It's like, oh, good. They're kind of the players. It's the players' league. They're taking control of their fate. They do that. We, to an extent, applauded Pierre-Luc Dubois, unless you were in a Columbus Blue Jackets or Winnipeg Jets fan. But, when he came out and just said, look, I've only got one career and I want to go to a place where I want to see myself long-term, it's sort of that way of thinking across, like even in, college football, you think about it. And, there are players who, get recruited, spend 2 years at a place and decide to spend, their last 2 years somewhere else, transfer to another team. Maybe, if you're a 2-star recruit and you go to a team like Western Kentucky and you kill it for 3 years, become, an NFL draft prospect, maybe you've earned the right to have a chance to play at like an Auburn or an Alabama or Notre Dame or Michigan, national champion Michigan, I should say. Maybe you've earned that right. And that's sort of the new way of thinking where, look, it's their lives. Like, shouldn't they have some say as to where they want to play? If you're Cutter Gauthier, we don't know his reasonings for not wanting to play in Philadelphia, although based on the reaction we've heard from some other players over the past year, looking at you, Kevin Hayes, and looking at you, Torrey Krug, maybe there's something to the situation where Philadelphia, whether it's the franchise or the city or what, is just not the best situation to kind of develop in. There's a lot of people saying, when Morgan Frost was being healthy scratched for 50 times, a lot of people were holding up little picket signs that said free Morgan Frost. Maybe Cutter Gauthier saw that and it's just like, I don't know if that's a place where I kind of want to get my NHL career jump started. And it's interesting because you also have to kind of take in consideration where, okay, maybe he's got a point. Maybe if it's his life, his career, maybe he doesn't want to spend it in a situation that's going to, be stressful, be anxious. Maybe he's heard too many horror stories about John Tortorella and, sort of his treatment of younger players. We don't know. And I think the reaction from some, people in Philadelphia, taking this 19-year-old kid and basically making him a pariah in the city. I mean, is that really what we want to be doing with 19-year-old athletes? If a 17-year-old kid, decides is between like Georgia and Alabama, like a high school football star between Georgia and Alabama, and he decides to pick Alabama over Georgia. If you're like a 48-year-old diehard Georgia fan, or you really want to take this 17-year-old kid on Twitter and just tear him a new one, it's not a good look for you. And I think there's a lot of people that I think need to take that to heart on the Philadelphia side. I get it. It sucks to be spurned. Trust me, I went through Jimmy Vesey for the Nashville Predators way back when. Who knows what he's doing nowadays. I get it. Like, I get that it's kind of a slap in the face to hear that somebody doesn't really want to be a part of your team or your city or your franchise moving forward. I get that that's a little bit of a slap in the face, but the way that I think some people are taking this, where they're, blasting this 19-year-old kid on Twitter, and you have the owner of the team basically come out and said, when this kid gets to the NHL, we're going to boo the crap out of him. I think that is just maybe a sign of what's wrong with sports. I get it. Like, it sucks. It sucks to be a Flyers fan and hear one of the best, offensive prospects in hockey right now doesn't want to be on your team. But I think we need to take a step back and realize that at the end of the day, Cutter Gauthier needs to do what's best for Cutter Gauthier. He's got one career. Maybe a 15, 20-year window. And if he doesn't want to play for the Philadelphia Flyers, maybe he shouldn't be on the Philadelphia Flyers. And maybe that should be the end of that conversation. and maybe everybody should be looking forward to what they have instead of what they don't. That is going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow with an all new episode. We will see you then.